Ancient legends and myths that were later proven true by science. Who doesn't love a good mysterious story? Of course, we all heard about many myths and legends, but never thought someday will turn out as a reality. How much of this is true? Well, we left these questions for the scientists to answer. That's why we brought a few exciting stories that science proved to be true. Let's take a look and start with the number one story on this list, the Cave of Forgotten Dreams. On 13 December 1994, on a cliff face in the Arcadech Gorge in the south of France, three speleologists first felt a slight draught of air coming from the rocks. They pulled them away and crawled into a space barely wide enough for the human body. Descending a steep shaft, they found themselves in a vast underground cavern of astonishing beauty. But nothing prepared them for what they saw next. As they advanced into the 400-meter-long chamber, one of the three, Eliade Brunel, suddenly let out a cry. She said later, "Our light flashed on to a mammoth, then a bear, then a lion with a semicircle of dots which seemed to emerge from its muzzle like drops of blood. A rhinoceros. We saw human hands, both positive and negative impressions, and a frieze of other animals 30 feet long." Head over to southern France and you may find yourself near the Chevaux-Pont d'Arc cave, one that was once inhabited by our ancestors 37,000 years ago. This cave wall is an archaeological and anthropological treasure trove. Its walls are adorned with pigmented artwork depicting a plethora of wildlife. Thanks to this site was called the Cave of Forgotten Dreams. The mysterious spray feature inside the cave, along with the overlaid gargoyle paintings and traces to emphasize the detail. In 1994, on one of the cavernous walls, a very peculiar mural was discovered, one partially overlapping a couple of those giant deer. It's hard to explain, but it looks a lot like the spray of something in the sky rising. Most believe this was an abstract image for many decades, but this was thought to be odd for a long time, often depicting literal objects in the cave imagery. A team of researchers stumbled on a marvelous thought. What if it depicted a volcanic eruption? As it so happens, the remnants of a powerful eruption just 35 kilometers, or about 22 miles, were found down the road in the Bas Vivarais volcanic field. Some techniques revealed it to have taken place around the time these cave drawings were made, and it would have been so explosive that the people living back then would have certainly been inspired to etch it into stone for all to remember. Number 2. The Disappearance of Tiamanu. The tale tells of the cuckolded husband, Roramanu, whose wife Sawitu went to live with another man on the island of Tiamanu. An enraged Rimanu purchased a wave curse to seek his revenge and traveled to the island of Tiamanu, with 4 waves attached to the front of his canoe and 4 on the rear. Once ashore, he planted the 2 taro plants, kept another, and beat a hasty retreat to his own island of Elite. The curse stated that when the leaves sprouted on his taro plant, the onslaught would start. On that day, Roramanu watched from the mountaintop as the 8 waves surged on Tiamanu, one by one until it sank, never to be seen again. The waves in the story are a description of the tsunami rain. Many tsunamis consist of a series of waves, but of course, waves can't wash away islands, particularly islands that are high and volcanic. It was actually a seafloor earthquake that geologists believe took the island, which has always teetered on the edge of a steep undersea slope. Once the tremors shook the foundations, a large landslide carried Tiamanu underwater, which likely generated a tsunami train in the process. Number 3. Vampireism in the Korean sky. Philosophical texts spoke of an explosion of light in the skies over Korea back on March 11, 1437. The peninsula was not split into 2 nations at the time, but under the rule of Joseon dynasty. It was unified. Certainly, it was an advanced imperial state, one in which language, literature, money, and law had evolved very well. Technology, too, made a debut in the form of astronomy in particular. Some of its stargazers saw a flash above their heads back on that night in 1437, and it seemed to last for 2 whole weeks before vanishing. Some believed it was a divine phenomenon at the time. The more grounded they suspected it was, the more a new star was created. Until 2017, no one was any the wiser until a team of researchers solved the mystery. Intrigued by the descriptions of this perhaps legendary event, the team tracked the remnants of the explosion to the constellation of Scorpius. The glowing embers of the long-gone blast, along with some old photographic plates, revealed that it wasn't a newborn star but a nova. A nova is the result of a white dwarf, the dead core of an ancient star, and a companion star dancing destructively around each other. The dense dwarf steals hydrogen gas from its partner until it reaches a critical mass, wherein it collapses under the influence of gravity and triggers an unstoppable fusion reaction. It culminates in a huge explosion, one that can be seen clearly as far as Earth. So it wasn't a birth all those centuries ago that was witnessed, it was an act of stellar vampirism gone wrong. Number 4. The Fires of Queensland. One such story had been passed down through 230 generations of Gugu Badun Aboriginal people. It's a spectacular 7,000-year-old story, one that predates most of the world's great civilizations. In the 1970s, a tape recording reported an elder speaking of a huge explosion shaking the world, accompanied by the revelation of a massive crater. The acrid dust swept across the skies, and they were never seen again if people stepped through the cloud. The weather was boiling, and it was all ablaze along the rivers and the coast. A curious research team serendipitously found that Kinrara, a now existent but once violent volcano in northeastern Australia, erupted at the time the story was first told. This particular blast would have smothered the region in hot ash, as well as generating huge lava flows that would have burned the very earth in which the Aboriginal ancestors walked. Amazingly, the eyewitness account has survived for millennia to this very day. Number 5. The Mischief making Catfish of Doom. Although the Chinese imported dragon character used to be seen in Japanese folklore as the primary antagonist, it was eventually determined during the 18th century that the real culprit was a giant catfish known as Namazu. Known as a yokai, a creature that brings misery, it was said that devastating earthquakes were triggered by the wiggling of his tail. Often the god Kashima was able to immobilize him, but sometimes the catfish managed to do some serious wiggling when he was not looking. Back in 1855, a shallow 7.0 meter quake struck Edo, now Tokyo, whose record-breaking shaking force devastated most of the city and killed up to 10,000 people, and it was suspected that the deadly jiggle of Namazu was responsible. This was, in fact, triggered by the sudden rupture of the Eurasian and Philippine sea plates along the complex juncture. Someday, this kind of earthquake will happen again, but now we know it's the forces of nature at work, not the whim of an underwater beast. Number 6. The Tears of Pele. Lighting up ancient Hawaiian legends, Pele, the goddess of fire, lightning, wind, dance, and volcanoes, is a well-known character. Otherwise known the woman who devours the land, Pele's home is believed to be Halimamu crater at the summit of Kilauea, one of the world's most active volcanoes. However, all of Hawaii lays the setting for her stories, so that to this day, any volcanic eruption in Hawaii is attributed to Pele's longing to be with her true love. Pele is renowned for her passionate and fiery temperament, and many people who visit the islands will hear stories of her power and destruction. It's said that she first arrived on the island of Hawaii to flee from her mercurial older sister. She concealed herself in hideaways on each and every island until she buried herself in a pit at Kilauea. That's why legends say Kilauea is Hawaii's active volcanic center, at least on land today. It's a visually resplendent story, but in reality, the volcanism is caused by a superheated, upwelling mantle plume that's triggering a lot of crustal melting just beneath Kilauea. It also said that the tears and hair of Pele can be found scattered around the volcano, but the real story here is one of physics. When lava cools incredibly rapidly, particularly when it's quenched in water or a small amount of it flies through the air, it turns into volcanic glass. When they get stretched through motion and then cool, they sometimes form tear-shaped droplets. On other occasions, they are stretched thin to form vitreous hairs.